Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world where comfort is a luxury. Warmth is borrowed from a smoky fire, and every sunrise feels like a small miracle. You open your eyes inside a hut that smells of damp straw, wood ash, and something faintly alive, probably the goat sleeping 2 feet away. The walls are wattle and daub. The floor is dirt, and the only window is a hole plugged with sheep splatter. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where the secret to surviving isn't written in any book, but etched into daily rituals of faith, fire, and pure, stubborn willpower. You probably won't survive this at least not without catching something unpleasant first. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch under a rough wool blanket, scratchy as a hay bale, and try not to think about the flea circus performing under it. The morning starts not with sunlight, but with the sound of the hearth being coaxed back to life, someone stirring ashes, someone coughing. Smoke curls low across the ceiling. Your eyes sting, but that haze keeps bugs away, so you take it as a blessing. The fire isn't just warmth, it's life insurance. Without it, food spoils, water chills, and illness creeps in. The fire pit is the household's sacred core. You sit up, pull on layers that smell of wood smoke and sheep fat, and glance toward the door where daylight seeps through the cracks. Outside, mud reigns supreme. Medieval people walked through so much muck it practically defined their existence. You wade out to the yard, dodging puddles and chickens, feeling the chill of morning creep through your shoes. Rather, leather sacks pretending to be shoes. The ground squelches, and your toes already regret every life choice that brought you here. It's hard to imagine, but this mud is survival. It seals your hut's walls, softens your floors, and even provides insulation of a sort. People mixed straw and dung into it, plastering the cracks against wind and rain. You might call it gross. They called it keeping warm. And when historians talk about smoke-blackened rafters, it's not poetic, it's literal. You're breathing centuries of soot. Still, amid the grime, there's a rhythm of faith. You hear the faint toll of a distant bell, matins or lauds, depending on how holy your neighbors are feeling. The bell is your alarm clock, your calendar, your social media notification, all at once. It ties the scattered farms together under one sacred schedule. You cross yourself, maybe more from habit than piety, and whisper a small prayer not for riches, but for steady weather and no sudden plagues. See, faith isn't just belief, here it's survival protocol. People prayed for rain, for health, for livestock fertility. They lit candles to saints for every imaginable danger. Saint Apollonia for toothaches, Saint Roch for plague, Saint Christopher for travelers. Even skeptics hedged their bets. You never knew when a little superstition might save your hide. Historians still argue whether medieval faith was driven more by fear or by genuine devotion, but either way, it kept hope alive when logic offered none. You glance toward the wooden crucifix hanging near the hearth, smoke-stained, its Christ figure carved rough but tenderly worn. Families spoke to it like an old friend. They asked for blessings before heading into the fields, before childbirth, before anything risky, which in this age is basically everything. The line between faith and daily life is non-existent. You don't just believe, you breathe belief. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a piece of coarse bread so hard it could double as armor. You soften it in watered ale and chew slowly. Water alone is risky as probably teeming with things you can't pronounce. So, people drank small beer. Weak ale brewed safer than water, low in alcohol, high in calories. Kids drank it too. When you realize that, suddenly medieval parenting seems both questionable and brilliant. You chew, stare at the smoke rising, and feel the ache of last night's labor in your shoulders. Farming, hauling, needing everything here requires muscle, and you've got to do it while half sick most of the time. A little fever doesn't earn you rest. It just slows your pace until someone notices and mutters that maybe you've been cursed. Ah yes, curse is the other half of survival psychology. If something goes wrong, there's always a reason, even if science hasn't been invented yet. A cow dies, witchcraft, crops fail. God's wrath, child falls ill. Maybe the fairies took it. Blaming the unseen isn't foolish, it's comforting. It keeps you from collapsing under chaos. Medieval minds needed structure, even if that structure came wrapped in incense and rumor. Outside, a neighbor trudges by, his cloak stiff with dried mud. He nods, but doesn't smile. Smiling costs energy. You greet him politely because community equals protection. People survive together, not alone. If your roof collapses or your sheep wander off, it's the neighbors who'll help you rebuild or track them. But if you're known for laziness or arrogance, you'll find yourself very alone come winter. Reputation is survival currency here. As daylight strengthens, you head to the fields. The earth smells alive, thick and wet. You turn the soil with a wooden plow, the ox snorting clouds of breath into the chill. It's slow, brutal work. Yet, somehow, the rhythm of its step, pull, breathe feels anciently soothing. The earth responds to persistence, not perfection. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants had spare time or if every waking hour was toil. The truth sits somewhere between. Yes, they worked endlessly, but there were pockets of rest, of storytelling, of laughter around the fire. By midday, your back aches, and the sun, a weak disk behind clouds, feels like mercy. You pause, wipe your brow, and drink from a leather flask. The taste of ale and metal lingers, and your lips crack from the cold. A hawk circles high above, searching for movement. You envy its freedom, but know even it hunts constantly. Survival is a universal rule, here bird, beast, or human. Back at the hut, you hear a familiar chant, your spouse muttering over a smoking pot. Not incense, garlic and onion stew, thickened with barley. You joke that it's probably last week's stew reincarnated, and for once, you're not wrong. Meals stretch, nothing is wasted. You dip bread into the pot, grateful for heat, and the smoke stings your eyes again. The air inside feels like breathing through a wool blanket, but it's yours. It's home. As night creeps in, the fire glows orange, and the shadows deepen. You sit close to the flames, feeling your eyelids grow heavy. Outside, the wind hums through cracks like a ghost trying to get in. You mumble another prayer, mostly muscle memory now, and think of how many nights like this have passed before you. Millions of fires. Millions of people whispering the same fears into the dark. A quirky fact. Medieval folk sometimes believed smoke carried prayers to heaven faster. So, technically, your hut is a chimney-shaped confessional. You imagine your half-muttered "please don't let me freeze" wafting skyward with the sparks. Joining countless other pleas from nameless souls, before sleep, you feed one last log to the fire. The embers hiss, crackle, and throw fleeting, spark-steamy, glowing hearts that refuse to die. You lie down, listening to your own breathing and the faint rustle of mice in the thatch. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, then silence. Faith, mud, and fire, three elements that hold this fragile life together. You've survived another day, not by strength alone, but by ritual. Every act lighting a hearth, crossing yourself, patching walls with dung as part of a quiet code of endurance. You're not just living. You're translating survival into routine. And as your eyes close, the world outside fades into the whisper of wind and the crackle of fire. You realize that maybe, just maybe, the secret to enduring this world isn't brute power, it's learning to love the small. Stubborn comforts, the warmth of embers, the taste of humble bread, the company of faith in the dark. The first thing you feel when you wake is hunger. Not the polite kind you fix with a midnight snack, but the deep, gnawing emptiness that hums behind your ribs like a second heartbeat. The air smells faintly of ash and boiled cabbage, and your stomach reminds you that yesterday's bread was the last piece left. You sit up in the half-dark, your head brushing the thatched roof, and you can hear the quiet shuffle of your household moving soft footsteps. Low murmurs, the scrape of a pot that doesn't have much to hold. This is the hunger season. Everyone knows it. You can't point to it on a calendar because no one owns one, but you feel it the way you feel winter coming through a draft. It begins after the autumn harvest and lingers through the long months before the next planting takes hold. The barns are nearly empty. The root cellar smells of damp rot, and even the rats are looking thinner. You start rationing without realizing it, half a bowl today, a smaller one tomorrow. You pull on your cloak, thin as parchment, and step outside. The sky is pale, almost translucent, like the belly of a fish. Frost crusts the edges of the thatch, glittering prettily if you can afford to notice beauty while starving. The ground is stiff, the fields gray and lifeless. It's hard to believe that anything will ever grow again. The trick to survival now is knowing what not to eat as much as what you can. People have their secret recipes for endurance. You might mash dried peas into paste or grind acorns into flour after soaking them to wash out the bitterness. Some scrape moss from trees, some chew bark. It's less about nourishment and more about pretending you're eating something on purpose. Historians still argue whether the medieval diet was healthier than 8 hours. Some point to its lack of processed food and natural ingredients. Others just wave pictures of rickets and call it a day. Truth is, if you had access to constant bread and beer, you were already winning. But when those ran out, the world turned creative. You walk to the communal oven, a massive clay dome at the edge of the village. It radiates warmth like a sleeping giant. A few neighbors are already there, whispering about whose dough turned to stone and whose still might rise. Everyone measures their flour with suspicion it's a precious currency now. Someone mutters that last year, old Willa mixed her flour with ground beans to stretch it, and no one could stop sneezing for days. You laugh quietly, even as your stomach complains. Humor is the village's other staple crop, grows even when nothing else does. The smell of scorched crust lingers in the air, and you catch yourself dreaming of butter, though you haven't seen any in months. Butter in the Middle Ages was practically gold unless you owned cows and enough salt to preserve it. You remember the taste of it melting on warm bread and almost cry from nostalgia. Then you remind yourself sentiment doesn't fill bellies. Back home, you check your stores: a few onions, a shriveled turnip, some dried beans. Not much, but you've learned the secret of the hunger months. Disguise scarcity as tradition. Every stew becomes a fasting dish. Every skipped meal becomes penance. Even the church calendar conveniently lines up with Survival Lent, Advent, Fasting Fridays. You might tell yourself it's holy restraint, but deep down, it's simply adapting faith to famine. You stir a pot of beans, add a pinch of salt like it's magic dust, and pray it softens. Hunger has a way of making prayer sound more sincere. You murmur Saint Isidore's name, patron of farmers, and promise him extra candles if the next harvest doesn't fail. There's a strange peace in this rhythm of want. Hunger becomes familiar, almost a companion. You learn to move slower, to conserve energy. You notice smells more sharply, the faint sweetness of wood smoke, the sour tang of fermenting cabbage, the ghost of a neighbor's stew floating on the wind. Every scent becomes a memory of fullness. By midday, you join a small group heading into the woods. You carry a sack, hoping to find anything that can stretch the week's food. The forest, even barren and cold, still holds secrets. You know where to find wild garlic, if the snow's light enough to dig through. You know how to tell edible mushrooms from the ones that make your vision dance before your body collapses. You keep those rules close. Forgetting them means death. You reach a clearing where the ground dips, and a small spring gurgles beneath the frost. One of the elders kneels and checks for signs of water. Seeds, bitter but edible. Another scrapes bark from willow trees, muttering that it eases fever when brewed. It's a kind of magic, this gathering a ritual of shared desperation and quiet hope. No one speaks loudly. It feels like you might scare the food away. A quirky historical tidbit. People in some regions made bread out of ground fern roots during hard winters. It tasted like chewing on regret, but it kept them alive. You think about that as you pick a few sprigs of garlic and tuck them carefully into your sack. Every handful feels like treasure. On your way back, you pass a field of scarecrows, their ragged shapes stiff with frost. For a moment, they look like watchful sentinels guarding the frozen land. You imagine them whispering among themselves? Not yet. Not yet. You smile at the thought, because the hunger season makes you see things differently. Hope and delusion start to blend. By the time you return, the sun's dipping low. The sky glows pink, then bruised purple. Inside the hut, the fire flickers, and your family huddles close. You share what you found, a few greens, a bit of dried fish traded earlier. The stew that follows is thin but warm, and for a moment, warmth feels better than fullness. You talk quietly as you eat, because talking tricks the brain into thinking its content. Someone cracks a joke about last year's famine when a man tried to make soup from his shoes. He swore it was good leather, you say, and everyone chuckles, even though you're not sure it's entirely a joke. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants starved as often as records. Suggest chroniclers loved a good tragedy, but the cycles of feast and famine were real. One year, the granaries overflow. The next, you watch your crops rot under endless rain. Survival means planning for both, knowing that comfort never lasts. After supper, you mend nets and baskets by the fire. The rhythm of weaving is hypnotic, a small rebellion against helplessness. You thread, knot, twist, imagining spring's return. Outside, wolves howl faintly, their cries echoing through the valley. It's both haunting and oddly reassuring. Wolves mean there's still life out there, still something surviving the cold. You look at the children curled up on straw mats, their faces soft in the firelight. You think of how they've learned the hunger code already, to chew slowly, to pretend they're full, to laugh when the pot's empty. This world teaches endurance early. You hope they'll see better days, though you don't dare say it aloud. Before bed, you mark a line on the wooden beam near the hearth, a quiet tally of days survived since winter began. The beam's already covered with them, small scars of persistence. You run your fingers over the rough grooves, feel the grain of the wood under your calloused skin. It's proof that you're still here. The wind moans outside, slipping through the cracks. You pull your cloak tighter and watch the last flame shrink to ember. In that fading light, the hunger seems almost noble. You think of saints who fasted for weeks, of hermits who lived on roots and faith alone. Maybe you're holy too, in your own small, desperate way. Then your stomach growls again, loud and unholy, and the thought breaks like a bubble. You laugh softly. The room smells of smoke and sweat and thin stew, but also of survival. Hunger has not won yet. And as you lie back on the straw, the last thing you see is the faint glow of embers pulsing like a heartbeat. You close your eyes, whisper a small promise to yourself. Just one more day, one more dawn. That's the code: quiet endurance, one meal, one breath at a time. When you wake this time, the cold doesn't bite, it clings. The kind of chill that settles into your bones and refuses to leave, no matter how many layers you wear. And speaking of layers, you're wearing all of them. 2 coarse wool tunics, a patched cloak, and a hood that smells faintly like wet dog. You don't own a mirror, but if you did, you'd look like a walking hay bale wrapped in laundry. The Middle Ages aren't kind to the body, especially not in winter. But you've learned the secret armor of the age: dirt and wool. That's right, filth isn't failure, it's insulation. The less you wash, the more your skin adjusts to the world's bacteria, and the thicker the grime barrier between you and frost. A bit revolting, yes, but effective. You scratch at your sleeve, noticing the faint powder of dust that never seems to go away, and chuckle to yourself. You're not dirty, you're medieval chic. A quick glance toward the corner shows your one prized possession, a sheepskin cloak, stiff with use, but still soft inside. You drape it around your shoulders, inhaling the musky scent of lanolin and smoke. People often rubbed animal fat or oil on their clothes to make them water-resistant. It worked, though it left everyone smelling like dinner. Historians still argue whether medieval folks truly stank as badly as jokes claim. Some insist they washed more than we think, while others swear the average villager could be smelled before seen. Outside, the morning frost glitters on the thatch like tiny blades. You step out and instantly regret it. The wind slices through your layers with surgical precision. Your breath fogs in front of you, drifting upward toward a sky so pale it looks carved from milk. You trudge toward the well, careful not to slip on the frozen ground. The bucket's rope is stiff, the water below black and still. You lower it, hear the splash echo like a ghost, and then wince as you pull it up. The wood burns your hands with cold. You don't drink it though, not raw. You know better now. Instead, you pour it into a pot back inside, stir in a splash of yesterday's vinegar, and set it near the fire. Vinegar water, a trick whispered by travelers and healers alike. It doesn't kill everything, but it's safer than trusting a bucket of medieval mystery. The sour temps hits your nose, and for a moment, it almost smells clean. Clean. That word feels like luxury. You think of how knights, nobles, and even monks had their own rituals for cleanliness. Bathhouses existed, yes, but not for everyone. Peasants like you made do with basins and hope. Still, even kings weren't safe from grime. There's a rumor that Henry IV of France bathed only once a year, and people considered him the fragrant exception. Yet another story claims some nobles believed hot water opened the pores to disease. You can't help but laugh. The same people who thought garlic cured the plague were terrified of soap bubbles. You remember hearing about the great bathhouses of London, places where steam, chatter, and scandal mixed freely. People soaked, gossiped, and occasionally conducted other business in those tubs. It's said that one bathhouse even offered music and food service. Imagine that, getting a foot rub while a minstrel sings about St. George. A bit different from your current spa, where the amenities include smoke and fleas. Speaking of fleas, one jumps from your sleeve to your wrist. You flick it off with practiced grace. It's practically a handshake at this point. Every medieval household is a little kingdom ruled by the flea monarchy. They bite, they itch, they multiply. Yet somehow, people endure them the way modern folks tolerate traffic, miserably, but inevitably. You grin to yourself, thinking how absurdly tough these people must have been. By mid-morning, you're layering straw against the walls again. It's the poor man's insulation. You pat it down, plug gaps with scraps of cloth, and hope it keeps the chill at bay. The house is a patchwork fortress, every crack mended with faith and creativity. You rub your hands together and hover them over the fire. The warmth barely reaches your skin, but even that flicker feels like grace. Someone knocks at the door, a neighbor, face wrapped in scarf and worry. Her child's coughing, she says, and she's come for advice. You're no healer, but everyone knows a few tricks. You rummage through your small chest of herbs, dried sage, garlic, a lump of beeswax, and hand her a mixture wrapped in cloth. Boil this, you tell her, and hang it near his bed. It won't cure much, but it'll make the air smell less like death. You think of the last plague rumor that reached your village, something about black swellings, bad air, and the wrath of God. Historians still argue whether the miasma theory truly shaped how people fought disease. What's clear is that everyone believed air itself could turn deadly. So, they fumigated rooms with rosemary, vinegar, or even burning feathers. Anything that smoked was considered holy medicine. You once watched a man wave a pot of burning dung through his house and swear it saved his family. It didn't, but he believed it did, and that faith was almost medicinal in itself. Later, you wrap your cloak tighter and step into the fields. The ground's hard, the color of old pewter. You check the fences, repair a few posts, and stomp your feet to keep the blood moving. Every breath is visible, each exhale a small cloud of life escaping into the cold. You remember what your grandmother said? If you can see your breath, it means your soul hasn't frozen yet. Comforting in a slightly terrifying way. By afternoon, the chill has turned your fingers stiff. You head to the blacksmith's forge to warm up. The air inside is thick with the scent of iron and fire. Sparks dance like fireflies as the blacksmith hammers rhythmically clang, hiss, clang. The sound fills the space, a heartbeat of survival. You stand by the fire, soaking in the heat. He glances up and grins. Cold enough to freeze St. Peter's beard, he says. You laugh, because everyone speaks in saint metaphors here. The warmth seeps into your bones, and for a moment you forget the hunger, the grime, the endless gray of winter. You feel almost human again. You even manage a joke if I get any dirtier. I'll start sprouting roots. The blacksmith chuckles and tosses you a lump of charcoal. Good, he says, plants get to eat more than we do. As evening falls, you head back home, the last light fading behind the trees. The village glows, faintly lanterns and windows, smoke trailing from chimneys, silhouettes moving like ghosts between huts. You catch the smell of something frying fat and onions. Maybe, mate? It makes your stomach growl, but it also stirs something else, belonging. In all this hardship, everyone is part of the same invisible pact. You help each other, feed each other, share warmth when you can. That's the real armor, the web of small kindnesses holding the village together. Inside your hut, you undress only halfway, too cold to remove everything. You spread your cloak on the straw bed, lie down fully clothed, and let the dirt comfort you. Your skin feels like parchment, your hair stiff with ash. You think about how odd it is that filth keeps you alive. Dirt fills the cracks in your shoes, seals your wounds, even hides your scent from predators when you hunt. Nature's camouflage smelly but smart. You close your eyes and the sound of crackling fire fills the silence. You imagine knights in shining armor, but now you know the truth: most armor wasn't shining. It was dull, dented, and rusty from sweat. Like you, they hid behind layers, trusting that grime and grit could deflect more than arrows. Maybe that's the real medieval secret. Polish is overrated. Survival is rough, imperfect, but steadfast. A strange peace settles over you. You've learned to love the dirt, to see it not as decay, but as a second skin. The fire hums low, and your breathing slows. Outside, snow begins to fall, soft flakes settling on roofs, fields, and faces turn skyward in quiet endurance. You think of tomorrow, of another dawn to brave, and whisper a sleepy promise to the fire. Stay with me through the night. The embers glow in response, small hearts of light inside a world of gray. Morning begins with a faint smell of sour wine and wet wood. The fire's gone to embers again, and you wake with your mouth dry as parchment. Beside you, the wooden cup from last night still holds a little wine or what passes for it. You take a sip, grimace at the sharp, vinegary bite, and swallow anyway. Congratulations, you've just completed your medieval version of brushing your teeth. You laugh softly, rubbing your eyes. In this world, wine isn't luxury, it's liquid survival. Water is everywhere, but none of it can be trusted. The rivers run with runoff from the tanneries. The wells taste faintly of rot, and even the rain collects bird droppings off the roof before reaching your barrel. So people turn to wine, ale, or cider, the drinks that don't try to kill you. You step outside and see the world glazed with dew, each blade of grass shining like glass. The air smells metallic, sharp, alive. You head to the communal well, where two women are already filling jugs. They gossip as they work, voices low, laughter quick and bright. One says the baker's apprentice nearly drowned last week when he leaned too far trying to fetch a bucket. A lesson, she says, for trusting water too much. The other nods and spits into the mud. It's not superstition, it's punctuation. You take your turn, lower the bucket, hear the splash echo through the stone throat of the well. The rope creaks, the handle groans, and when you lift it, the water gleams like a mirror. You can almost see your reflection, blurred and wavy. You pour a little out habit, respect for whatever spirits might dwell there. You've heard the stories. Wells are doorways, bridges to the underworld, or homes of saintly relics hidden long ago. People still whisper that the best wells never dry because angels guard them from below. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were truly pagan remnants or simply poetic attempts to explain the inexplicable. Either way, it's safer to bow than to mock. Back in your hut, you pour the water through a cloth to strain the worst of the grit, then splash in a bit of yesterday's wine. It fizzes faintly, alcohol meeting impurity in a centuries-old standoff. You sip it and wince. It tastes like sour bread and iron nails, but it'll do. By mid-morning, the sun begins its pale climb, and the village stirs into motion. You hear the rhythmic clack of a cooper shaping barrels, the low chant of women washing clothes in the stream, the soft bleating of goats from a nearby pen. That sound, the washing, draws you toward the river. You wander closer, curiosity overriding caution. The women beat the cloth against stones, each thump sending droplets flying. The water's murky, but moving, and they swear that's what makes it safe. Bad water doesn't run, one says. You almost believe her until you notice a dead fish drifting by. You quietly step back. The river is a paradox, a giver and a taker. It powers mills, cools feet, carries fish, and spreads disease in equal measure. You watch the mill wheel, turning lazily, the creak of wood almost soothing. That's the sound of survival. Mills grind grain, and grain makes bread, the thin line between feast and famine. You recall hearing a monk once describe bread as the body of life. You think he meant it literally. You follow the river downstream, where the air smells faintly of crushed grapes. A small cottage sits on the slope, your friend Elaine's place. He's a vintner of sorts, though his vineyard is more a hopeful patch of hillside than a grand estate. You find him there, boots sunk in mud, checking the wooden barrels stacked beside his door. He grins when he sees you, teeth stained purple from tasting his own work. Want a sip? He offers, holding out a clay cup. You hesitate, then take it. The wine burns your throat, sharp and earthy, but compared to well water, it's ambrosia. Alling laughs at your grimace. Not bad for peasant wine, he says proudly. You sit with him on a log, watching sunlight creep across the vineyard. The vines look half dead now, bare sticks wrapped in frost. But Alling speaks of them like children asleep, waiting for spring. He talks about how the monks taught him to ferment properly, how wine was once considered holy medicine, even used in hospitals. He swears by it, says a cup a day keeps death away. You raise an eyebrow, and how's that working for you? He scratches his beard and laughs. I'm not dead yet. Fair point. A quirky bit of knowledge floats through your mind. Some monasteries produced wine so pure and strong that it became their most profitable trade. Others made hypocras, a spiced blend of wine, sugar, and herbs served warm to nobles and kings. You imagine drinking something like that by the fire, feeling it melt through the cold. Then you look at your clay cup, half full of sour red, and decide your imagination tastes better. You and Ailing talk for a while about the coming spring, about taxes, about rumors of new plague cases in the next county. Neither of you dwells on it. Talk of disease is like summoning a storm. Better to sip and joke. You tease him that his wine could cure illness by scaring it away. He laughs, spills a little on the ground, and mutters that even saints would need a strong stomach to bless his brew. Later, you walk home slowly, warmth buzzing faintly in your veins. The road winds through fields sleeping under frost. A hawk circles above, the only thing in motion besides you. The silence is thick, ancient. You think of all the people who walked this same road before you pilgrims, merchants, soldiers, all of them, depending on water and wine to survive the same thirst. It's humbling, in a way. You're not just living, you're continuing an unbroken chain of endurance. By dusk, the air turns soft and gray. You stop by the church well to fill your jug for the evening. The stone rim glows faintly in the lamplight, and carved above it is a Latin phrase you can't read but recognize: aqua vitae, the water of life. You chuckle at the irony. Even the priests boil their water before drinking. Inside the chapel, candles flicker, and the smell of incense drifts through the door. The same smoke that blesses holy water also disguises the stench of mildew. Balance, always. Back home, you light your small fire and pour the last of the wine into a cup. The flicker of flames dances in the red liquid, and for a second, it almost looks alive. You raise it in mock toast. To survival, you whisper. The hut answers with a crackle from the hearth, like applause. You sip slowly, savoring the warmth. It fills your chest, your throat, your mind. Outside, the wind hums against the walls, and you hear rain beginning a steady patter that sounds like drumming fingers. The roof leaks, of course. You move your cup to catch a few drops out of habit, then laugh quietly. Even now, you're wary of plain rainwater. It's a reflex you'll never unlearn. As the night deepens, you stretch out by the fire, half drowsing. You remember the old stories, how knights drank wine before battle to calm their nerves, how monks used it during Mass to bridge heaven and earth, and how peasants like you used it for everything else, numbing pain, dulling hunger, making company tolerable. Somewhere between the first and last sip, you realize the truth. Water, wine, ale, they're not just drinks. They're choices, small gambles in a dangerous world. Every sip is an act of faith. Faith that the liquid won't poison you. Faith that you'll see another sunrise to pour another cup. You tilt your head back, finish the wine, and set the cup down. The fire crackles softly, the rain sings against the roof, and your eyelids grow heavy. You smile into the dark, thinking, maybe tomorrow I'll risk the well again. Or maybe not. The next morning breaks with a pale mist lying over the fields like a ghostly blanket. You wake to the sound of roosters and wooden wheels creaking outside. When you open your door, you see your neighbors already moving about, each following a rhythm older than memory. Here in the village, survival is not a matter of laws written on parchment, but of rules whispered between doorways and learned by watching who prospers and who disappears. You tie your cloak and step outside, greeted by the smell of damp earth and cooking smoke. Across the lane, old Marga, the baker's wife, waves you over. Her face has seemed like the bark of an oak tree, her eyes sharp as needles. She hands you a loaf, still steaming from the oven, thick, brown, and cracked at the top. "Brought me onions yesterday," she says, her voice gravelly. "So this one's yours." Fair's fair. That's how it works here. No coins exchanged, no tally kept on paper. Just quiet balance. If someone forgets their end, the whole village remembers. You thank her, tear off a piece, and bite into it dense, smoky, alive, with the taste of ground rye and ash. Children dart past, chasing a hoop made of bent willow. They stop when they see you, bow their heads in mock seriousness, then scatter again, laughing. Even at that age, they understand hierarchy. They know who to greet, who to avoid, who to obey. As you walk toward the square, you hear snatches of conversation, gossip mostly. A pig went missing last night. Someone's son was caught stealing eggs. A tinker's wagon arrived at dawn, carrying pots, knives, and rumors from neighboring towns. Gossip here is more than idle talk, it's currency. It buys you safety, information, sometimes even forgiveness. You nod at the tinker as he sets up near the well. His beard glitters with frost, and his eyes flick toward every movement, cataloging faces. He's an outsider, tolerated only because he brings what the villagers need: needles, pans, salt, and news. His voice carries as he speaks to the small crowd gathering. "They're saying another levy's coming," he announces, loud enough for the Reeves house to hear. "Lord's men'll want grain this time, not coin." Says it's for the border watch. The crowd murmurs anger, disbelief, resignation blending in equal measure. Someone mutters that the Lord's barns are already full. Another says the Reeve keeps the best grain for himself. You say nothing. Everyone knows complaining too loudly draws attention, and attention is the most dangerous thing in any village. The Reeve himself appears moments later, as if summoned by the murmurs. He's tall, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak that screams of privilege. He doesn't speak right away. He simply looks. That's enough. The chatter dies instantly. His gaze sweeps the crowd like a plow through soil. "The Lord protects us," he says flatly. And protection has its price. No one argues. They only nod. When he leaves, the silence lingers, a pressure that only eases after several heartbeats. You finally exhale, realizing your fists are clenched. Later, in the alehouse, the mood softens. The walls are low, the air thick with warmth and the sweet smell of brewing malt. Here, tongues loosen. People talk freely almost. You sit beside a carpenter named Hugo, who's busy carving a small figure from scrapwood. You hear what the tinker said? He asks without looking up. You nod. He chuckles grimly. A levy for protection, eh? From what? Our own hunger. You smirk, but don't answer. It's a dangerous game, how far a man can joke before it becomes sedition. Hugo knows that line well. He lowers his voice. Still, if a man hides his grain deep enough, who's to say how much he really has? You raise your cup. And who's to say if someone's watching? He grins crookedly. Then we watch the watchers. That's another rule of the village, the invisible web of eyes. Every person knows someone who listens. But it's not just fear that holds the village together. It's a strange kind of loyalty. They can betray a stranger, but never one of their own, not unless forced. By midday, you join a group mending fences at the edge of the fields. It's quiet work, the kind that lets your mind wander. You notice how cooperation here is wordless. One person lifts, another ties. A third drives the stake. No orders, no plans, just rhythm. It's survival disguised as harmony. An old man named Renard hums as he works a song about St. Cuthbert and the crows that once guarded his crops. Between verses, he leans close to you and whispers, "You keep your promises here. Even the ones you never spoke aloud." That's how you live long. You nod. In truth, you've already learned this. Every loaf traded, every favor repaid, every silence kept its part of a silent code that keeps the village from tearing itself apart. The moment someone breaks it, the balance shifts. You've seen it happen. There was a woman last winter, Solda, the midwife. Someone accused her of taking too much grain for her services. A lie probably, but it spread like frost. People stopped greeting her at market, stopped sharing food, stopped looking her in the eye. Within weeks, she left. No one knows where. Her cottage still stands empty, door swinging in the wind. That's what gossip can do. It can exile faster than any lord's decree. As the sun dips, you walk toward the edge of the woods where children are gathering twigs. One boy, Tomas, waves you over excitedly. "Look," he says, holding up a strange stone. It's smooth, dark, and shaped like an egg. Found it near the stream. Old Marga appears behind him, shaking her head. "That's a witch stone," she says, crossing herself. "Keep it by the door. It wards off evil." You smile faintly. In a world where plague, famine, and fire stalk the living, it's easier to believe in witch stones than in chance. The village runs on faith as much as fear, faith that rituals protect, that blessings work, that every misfortune has a cause, and every kindness a return. As evening falls, the bell at the church rings for vespers. Its sound rolls over the fields, deep and hollow. Everyone stops for a moment, farmers, children, even the tinker, each bowing their head just long enough to prove they still belong. The village's heart beats in that rhythm. Work, pause, pray, survive. You join them, murmuring the prayer you've half memorized. Deliver us from hunger and from the mouths of liars. When it's over, you follow the path home. Smoke drifts lazily from chimneys, and laughter spills from open doors. Despite the hardship, there's warmth here, in unspoken agreement that life is bearable if everyone carries their share. You pass Hugo's cottage, where light flickers behind oiled parchment windows. Through the thin walls, you hear the creak of a lute and a woman singing softly. It's not a song for joy, but for endurance, a melody older than anyone remembers. You slow your steps, letting the sound wrap around you like a cloak. Then you notice movement near the church well. The reeve again, speaking quietly with two men you don't recognize. They wear dark cloaks, travel-stained. Soldiers, maybe. You can't hear the words, but the tone-sharp, hushed urgence sets your nerves on edge. You keep walking. That's another unspoken rule. Don't look too closely at what you're not meant to see. Curiosity can turn fatal faster than thirst. Back in your hut, the fire burns low. You sit on the stool, tearing another piece from Marga's bread, dipping it in a small bowl of salted lard. It's simple, but it fills the emptiness. Outside, you hear a horse neigh, then the faint clatter of hooves heading toward the manor road. Whoever the reeve met, they're leaving quickly. You chew slowly, thinking about all the invisible threads that hold this village together. Not loyalty to a king, not fear of punishment, but mutual dependence, the knowledge that everyone needs everyone else to survive. Even the gossipers, even the thieves, even the reeve. A knock startles you. It's Alling the vintner, his face half hidden by the firelight. He looks uneasy. You heard? He whispers. They're saying the Lord's men will ride tomorrow. They'll take what grain they can carry. You nod slowly. And the rest? He hesitates. The rest, they'll burn. To teach obedience. For a long moment, you sit in silence. The flames pop. The world outside feels smaller, tighter, ready to crack. Finally, you speak. Then we hide what we can tonight. He nods, once, grimly. I knew you'd say that. As he leaves, you feel the old code stirring again, the same one that has kept people alive for centuries. You don't need to swear an oath or write a pact. The understanding runs deeper than words. Protect your neighbors, share the burden, lie when truth would kill. You grab your cloak and step into the night. The air is cold, the sky full of thin stars. One by one, you see other figures moving between cottages, carrying sacks, whispering, passing shadows like secrets. No one needs to say what they're doing. In the stillness, the village breathes together, united by fear, bound by trust. You pause by the well, look up at the distant manor house silhouetted against the moon, and whisper the only prayer that matters tonight. Let them think we're poorer than we are. Then you turn toward the fields, the hidden pits, the dark earth waiting to swallow your grain. Survival here isn't about strength. It's about knowing when to share, when to lie, and when to stay silent. And in that silence, under the vast, cold sky, you finally understand the true code of the village isn't written in ink or carved in stone. It lives in glances, gestures, and the quiet promise that no one will face the Lord's hunger alone. The night is still heavy on your shoulders when you return from the fields. You've buried sacks beneath the frost, hidden jars behind fallen logs, whispered with neighbors whose faces flickered like ghosts in the moonlight. Yet sleep doesn't come easily. Because in the Middle Ages, survival isn't just about food or shelter. It's also about what happens when the body falters, when fever comes knocking, when a cough turns to blood. You wake before dawn, your breath white in the dimness. Somewhere nearby, a rooster screams into the morning. You rub your arms, sore from the digging, and glance at the herbs hanging from your rafters, bundles of sage, rosemary? And something Marga swore was blessed thistle. They smell sharp and dusty, and you can't tell if they're meant for cooking or for warding off death. The air inside is thick with the scent of boiling nettles and damp linen. On the bed lies a woman pale as candle wax, her lips cracked. At her side sits a figure in a dark hued Agnes, the village healer. You've seen her before, though always from a distance. People call her wise woman when they need her, which when they don't. Her hands move gracefully over the patient, mixing something in a wooden bowl. "Ah," she murmurs, not looking up. "You came. Good. Hold this." She passes you a mortar filled with green pulp. It smells of mint and bitterness. You obey, feeling the sticky weight between your fingers. Agnes dips a rag in it, presses it to the woman's chest, and begins to hum. It's not a tune you recognize, half melody, half muttered words. The boy watches, wide-eyed. The woman's breathing slows, just enough to make you believe something real might be happening. After a moment, Agnes wipes her hands and sits back. "If she's lucky, she'll last till spring," she says quietly. "If not, I'll make her comfortable." You look around. Jars line the shelves, powders, oils, dried roots. There's something comforting in the order of it all, as if death itself might be kept at bay through careful labeling. Outside, the air feels colder. Agnes follows you out, pulling her hood tighter. "Don't tell the Reeve I was here," she says. You frown. Would he care? Her smile is thin. He cares about anything he can't tax. And there it is, the quiet war between faith and knowledge, between church and village. Officially, healing belongs to priests and sanctioned physicians, men who study Latin texts and charge gold for their wisdom. But here, in the mud and straw of ordinary life, salvation comes from women like Agnes, from herbs and whispered prayers. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine was miracle or madness. Some say it was pure superstition, leeches, bloodletting, crushed toads for fever. Others point out that many of their herbal remedies actually worked. Willow bark for pain, honey for wounds, garlic for infection. It's hard to draw the line between magic and chemistry when you don't yet know what germs are. You follow Agnes back to her cottage, curious. Inside, the walls are covered with charms, woven straw figures, dried garlands, a small wooden cross tucked behind a bunch of lavender. On the table, she lays out her tools, knife, pestle, a scrap of parchment scribbled with strange symbols. "You ever wonder," she says as she grinds something in the mortar, "why the saints and the spirits both listen when you ask the right way?" You smile faintly, because everyone's desperate. She laughs a short, rough sound. "Exactly." She hands you a small pouch. "Dried comfrey, for the pain in your arm. Boil it in ale, drink it warm." You raise an eyebrow. "Ale. Water's for fools," she says, echoing the old saying. "Ale's safer." You leave her hut with the pouch tucked into your cloak. The air thick with smoke, and something darker, maybe hope. As you walk back through the village, you pass the church. Its door stands open, and inside, the priest is murmuring mass to an empty room. His voice echoes like wind through stone. He doesn't notice you. Or maybe he pretends not to. Later that day, word spreads. The Lord's soldiers arrived at a nearby village, took everything, left disease behind. The gossip moves faster than the horses ever could. By noon, half the village is in panic, some praying, some preparing. You see Agnes near the well, gathering water. She moves calmly, as if she's seen this pattern before. "Fear is its own sickness," she says to no one in particular. "Spreads faster than plague." You remember the woman from the morning, the boy's haunted eyes. You ask, "Do you ever get used to it?" Agnes looks up sharply. "Death? No. But I've learned not to argue with it." That night, she invites you to help with her rounds. You follow her from cottage to cottage, carrying a lantern that flickers like a nervous heart. She tends to a farmer with a festering wound, a child with fever, a woman too weak to rise. Each time, she uses something different: garlic poultices, salt water, whispered blessings. Once, she places her hand on a man's brow and mutters, "By St. Walpurga's grace, by the wormwood's bite." You can't tell if she's praying or casting something older. Between visits, she tells stories how some healers learned from Arabic texts brought back by crusaders, how monks copied Greek manuscripts by candlelight. Knowledge travels, she says, even when kings try to chain it. You ask where she learned, she grins. From my grandmother, and she from hers. Some of it from books, most of it from mistakes. You walk on in silence, the air filled with the smell of damp earth and crushed herbs. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howl. Near midnight, you visit an old shepherd who can barely breathe. Agnes kneels beside him, checks his pulse, then reaches into her satchel. She pulls out a vial of thick, golden liquid. Honey and vinegar, she explains. Old Roman cure. They used it for everything. She feeds him a spoonful, then sits quietly, holding his hand. You stay until his breathing steadies. When he finally falls asleep, she sighs. Sometimes, she says softly, that's all we can do, make it hurt less. You walk her home in silence. The stars are sharp tonight, the sky clear. You pass the blacksmith's forge, the empty square, the flickering windows of sleeping homes. For the first time in a long while, the village feels peaceful. Agnes stops at her door, looks back at you. Remember, she says, the body listens to what the heart believes. That's why blessings work. Sometimes you smile, but your thoughts are uneasy. You think of the church's warnings about heresy, of whispered accusations, of how quickly admiration can turn to fear. The next morning, you hear murmurs at the well. Someone saw the priest visiting the reeve. Someone else says the Lord's men don't trust healers who speak with herbs instead of scripture. By noon, Agnes's door is closed. No smoke rises from her chimney. The villagers avoid her path. Even Marga mutters, best not to get mixed in it. You find her by the river gathering water plants. They're afraid. You tell her. She shrugs. Fear's a habit here. So is forgetting. That night, as frost settles over the fields, you see light from her window, again a flicker, faint but steady. She's still there, still working, still keeping people alive while others debate the sin of it. You realize then that the secret code of survival runs through her too. It's not written in any book. It's the quiet defiance of those who heal when forbidden, who trade when taxed, who pray to more than one power just in case. Weeks later, when the fever finally reaches your own cottage, first a cough, then the ache, then the sweat, you remember everything Agnes taught. You boil comfrey, mix vinegar, burn herbs by the window. You whisper her words, though you're not sure you believe them. And slowly, as the days pass, the fever breaks. You wake weak, but alive. Outside, the snow has melted. Spring has come again. You step out into the sunlight, clutching the pouch of dried herbs still half full. You think of Agnes, the woman she healed, the countless faces that passed through her hands. You know she won't get thanks, maybe not even safety. But her work, the small mercies, the whispered cures, that's the true heartbeat of this world. You lift your face to the wind and smile faintly. Because in a century where medicine is a gamble and faith a necessity, survival isn't about purity or power. It's about listening to both the saints and the soil-land, trusting whichever one answers first. The wind shifts again. You feel it the next morning, that strange hum in the air that means a feast day is approaching. The bells at the church ring, more often, longer. Louder, like a reminder that even in hunger, even in fear, faith demands its due. You tighten your cloak and follow the crowd toward the square. Bread smells float in the air, and for a moment you almost forget that half the village is still coughing from the winter fever. Feast days are rare, but when they come, the whole village rearranges itself around the church. The reeve, the smith, the children, even Agnes, yes, She's there at the edge of the crowd, hood up, head bowed. You catch her eye for a second. She smiles faintly, then disappears into the tide of people. Inside the church, candles flicker, casting trembling halos on the stone walls. The priest stands before the altar, his voice deep and tired. We break bread, he intones, to honor the Lord's bounty, to remember his mercy, and to repent our sins of hunger and pride. You kneel like everyone else, knees pressing into the cold flagstones. Your stomach growls quietly. Fasting was required yesterday, and your body hasn't forgotten. That's the rhythm here: starve before you feast, atone before you eat. It's a kind of discipline that keeps the body sharp and the soul obedient. When the priest lifts the wafer, sunlight strikes through the stained glass and spills across the altar like liquid fire. The colors move: red, gold, blue, and for a heartbeat, you feel something close to awe. Maybe faith really is a survival tool, not a comfort, but a weapon against despair. After Mass, the feast begins outside. Villagers gather around the long wooden tables, laughing louder than usual, trading bits of bread and meat like treasure. You sit with Hugo, the carpenter, who's already on his second cup of ale. Can you believe, he says, slapping your shoulder. They call this the Lord's bounty. 2 days' grain and a salted pig's head. You laugh softly. Better than nothing. He grins. But it's never enough. You chew your bread slowly, watching the reeve carve slices from the pig. He gives the best pieces to his men, of course, but a few shreds make their way down the line. Children dart between legs, catching crumbs. Across the square, Agnes speaks quietly with Marga. You can tell by their posture that it's something serious. Heads close, hands moving. The priest watches them from a distance, his expression unreadable. Later, as the sun starts to dip, he calls everyone back to attention. Tomorrow, he declares, we fast again for the souls in purgatory. And remember, charity redeems the heart. Give what you can. The villagers nod dutifully. Charity is just another survival rule: half faith, half insurance. Give enough, and maybe your neighbors will feed you when you fall sick. Give nothing, and you risk being forgotten. When the crowd disperses, you wander toward the churchyard. There's music coming from somewhere, single fiddle, played slow and sweet. You find the source. An old man sitting by the gravestones, bow moving over the strings like a whisper. You sit beside him without speaking. After a while he says, you ever notice how the feasts taste better when you think they might be your last? You smile. You always this cheerful. He chuckles, the sound cracked but warm, just practical. His words linger in your mind. In a world this fragile, joy isn't a luxury, it's a rebellion. That evening, you visit the tavern again. The air buzzes with leftover laughter, but beneath it runs a current of worry. Everyone knows the soldiers are near, collecting the levy. The reeve has been pacing the square like a restless hound. You sit at a corner table, sipping weak ale. Agnes appears beside you, sliding onto the bench without a word. You've been quiet, you say. She glances around. They're talking about more than grain this time. The Lord wants healers brought to the manor to bless his new child. You frown, and you? I'm not on his list, she says dryly. But someone will name me soon enough. Wouldn't that be an honor? You ask, half joking. She laughs softly. Honor gets you hanged as often as fed. You know she's right. The church tolerates her only because she keeps people alive. The Lord, though he needs loyalty, not miracles he can't explain. The next morning, the bell tolls again. This time, not for feast or prayer, but for judgment. A young man, Thomas, the shepherd's son, is accused of stealing from the reeve stores. You join the crowd gathering in the square. The air feels sharp, brittle. Thomas stands before the reeve, head bowed. I didn't take it, he says quietly, to a spoiled grain. The reeve doesn't answer. Instead, he looks to the priest. Let God decide. The priest says. By trial, a murmur ripples through the crowd. Trial by ordeal ancient, brutal, but common. Thomas's hand is plunged into boiling water. If it heals clean, he's innocent. If it festers, guilty, you can barely watch. The steam rises. His scream cuts through it like a blade. When it's over, the reeve declares, "We will see in 3 days." That's how faith works. Here equal parts hope and horror. After the crowd disperses, you find Agnes near the church door. Her jaw is tight, her eyes furious. "If they let that wound fester, he'll die," she mutters. "You'll help him?" you ask. Of course. She looks around, but quietly. Mercy's a sin when it undermines God's will. That night, you help her again. You sneak to Thomas's cottage under the cover of darkness. He lies pale and shaking, hand wrapped in ragged cloth. Agnes works quickly, honey, for the burn. Linen soaked in vinegar. "The saints can take credit later," she whispers. You watch as the boy's breathing steadies. For a moment, you think maybe this is what faith was meant to be, not obedience, but compassion. The next day, the church bell rings again, not for Thomas, but for the feast of St. Blaise, protector of throats. The irony isn't lost on you. People gather in the square, candles in hand. The priest blesses them with crossed candles, praying for protection from illness. Historians still argue whether these rituals brought comfort or control. Some say they united communities. Others claim they kept people obedient through fear. You can't decide which feels truer. That evening, the reeve visits your cottage. His expression is unreadable. "You were seen last night," he says. "Keep your voice calm." Fetching water, he studies you. Then nods slowly. "Best keep your distance from the healer." The Lord prefers loyalty clean of superstition. When he leaves, your heart hammers. You sit by the fire, staring into the embers, realizing just how fragile survival has become. Food can be hidden, sickness can be treated, but suspicion spreads faster than plague. Days pass. Thomas's wound heals clean. The reeve doesn't mention it again, though his eyes follow Agnes whenever she walks by. You start to notice other changes. Tootha priest preaching longer, warning of heresy. Villagers crossing themselves when Agnes's name is spoken. Then, one morning, the bell rings again. You freeze. It's the slow toll funeral rhythm. Someone has died. You follow the crowd toward the churchyard, where 2 soldiers stand beside a small cart. A shrouded body lies inside. "It's the Lord's steward," someone whispers. "Fever took him in the night." The priest steps forward, voice trembling. "A reminder," he says, "that no man escapes God's hand." But you notice something strange. The soldiers whispering to each other, glancing at the church, at the villagers, at the healer's hut in the distance. There's fear in their eyes. That night, rumors spread faster than fire. Some say the steward was cursed. Others say he stole tithes from the church. Agnes's name drifts on the edge of every whisper. You find her outside her hut, burning herbs that smell of smoke and sorrow. "They'll come for you," you warn. She nods slowly. They always do. The next morning, she's gone. Her hut stands empty, doors swinging in the wind. You stand there a long while, feeling the silence fill the space she once occupied. Then you turn toward the church, where the priest leads another prayer, his voice echoing against the stone. You mouth the words like everyone else, but inside, you know the truth. The Lord's table feeds faith, but it also feeds fear. Still, when the next feast comes, you kneel again, hands open, waiting for bread. Because that's what survival means. Here not choosing sides, but staying small enough to be overlooked, humble enough to be fed. As you swallow the wafer, dry and tasteless, you remember Agnes's words. The body listens to what the heart believes. And you realize, maybe belief isn't about saints or curses at all. Maybe it's just the one thing that keeps a hungry world from collapsing. The frost comes early this year. By mid-October, the fields are already wearing a thin white crust, fragile as eggshells, shimmering under the weak morning sun. You trudge along the village path, shoulders hunched against the wind, every step squelching in frozen mud. The smell of damp earth and smoke from neighbors' chimneys clings to the air. Even the dogs move slower, tails tucked, paws crunching against the icy ground. There's a tension under the village's surface now, a quiet hum you can feel in the bones of prelude, maybe to the hardships yet to arrive. You wake before dawn, as usual, to a pale gray light spilling through the cracks in your hut's wooden walls. Your breath curls like smoke in the cold air. The coals on the hearth are dead, leaving only ash and the lingering memory of heat. You pull your damp cloak around your shoulders and step outside, feeling the sharp bite of frost on your fingers. The rumors are already spreading soldiers near the borders, carrying the Lord's banners, but moving with their own hunger. No formal declaration of war has been made. Yet everyone knows what it means. These men will take what they need, whether the village has it or not. The reeve paces the square like a caged fox, counting grain, murmuring under his breath. Eyes flicking to each house with suspicion. You fill your bucket at the well, the water icy against your hands. 2 women are already there, whispering. They took half the stores from Gavin's village. One murmurs. Said it's for the king's army. King's army. The other snorts. More like the Lord's stomach. They glance at you and fall silent. Everyone has learned to be careful. Words are currency, and currency is dangerous in these times. Returning to your hut, you find Hugo waiting. His cloak is dusted with frost, and he moves with that same tense, cautious gait you've come to recognize. You heard? He asks. You nod. They're coming. Hugo's jaw tightens. The reeve says every house must give a tithe-bread ale, whatever they can spare. For defense, you both know what that really means. Starvation for the weakest, punishment for the slow, profit for the Lord's men. The meeting in the square is tense. Torches throw wavering light across the villagers' faces. The reeve's voice is harsh, carrying over the murmurs. The Lord demands our aid. Every hearth shall give 1 loaf and 1 flask of ale by week's end. Failure will be seen as treason. Treason, the word hangs in the air, sharp as a knife. It doesn't mean rebellion. Here it means death by neglect, the erasure of your existence. Agnes is gone. You feel the absence of her presence like a missing heartbeat, a hollow in the village rhythm. You can't help but wonder if she foresaw this, if her disappearance was a calculated act of survival. Hugo pulls you aside after the meeting. We can't give them everything, he mutters. We'd starve. You glance at the square. The reeve's men, carrying torches and leering, are already counting and weighing, tearing through what little the villagers could spare. Then we hide it, you whisper, and so begins the first of many silent wars. Before dawn the next day, you and Hugo move through the shadows, carrying sacks of grain. You bury half the winter store beneath the roots of a massive oak at the forest's edge. Your fingers numb from the cold, you pat the soil over the hidden treasure, murmuring a quiet prayer that the earth will keep it secret. This is survival calculated, patient, invisible. When you return, soldiers are already patrolling the village. Boots scuff through the mud, steel glints in the dim light. They tear into homes, overturn barrels, drag men into the square for inspection. You freeze as one passes your door, holding your breath, hoping he doesn't notice the hollow floorboards. Then comes the shout, they're hiding food. You turn to see Marta, face pale with terror, pointing toward the miller's barn. Soldiers converge, dragging the miller and his wife into the square. You watch, stomach tightening, as the men deal with her in ways that make your stomach churn. By the time the torchlight fades, the air smells of smoke and iron. Sleep that night is impossible. You lie awake on your straw mattress, listening to distant howls and the wind rattling the remaining roof beams. Hunger gnaws at you, but fear gnaws harder. Morning brings frost again, and the reeve, pale and grim, addresses the remaining villagers. "Let this be a lesson," he says. "Obedience ensures survival. Obedience, survival. You've learned that these are two sides of the same coin. But coins are not always fair, and the edges are sharp." Hugo meets you at the well that evening. "We have to leave," he says quietly. "They'll be back." "Where to?" you ask, scanning the darkening forest. "North. There's talk of a monastery. They feed wanderers." The road north is treacherous. You move at night, guided by moonlight and the distant howl of wolves. Each night brings new dangers, shadows that move too quickly, figures whose intentions are unclear, the constant threat of frostbite or hunger. You slip through marshes, across frozen streams, and under the skeletal limbs of winter trees. By the third night, the forest opens to the sight of the monastery, a solid gray fortress of stone perched on a hill. The gate is closed, but you knock anyway. A monk appears, cautious but not hostile. "Travelers?" he asks. Hugo nods. "From the south. We seek refuge." "You may stay until spring," the monk says, opening the gate. Inside, warmth and the smell of herbs and bread welcome you. Refuge, the word tastes sweet on your tongue after months of fear. The monastery becomes a temporary sanctuary. You work in the garden, mend tools, and help with the animals. You learn the rhythm of safety, light chores, shared meals, quiet prayers. It's a different survival, one not measured by the threat of soldiers or frost, but by discipline and cooperation. Weeks pass. Snow melts into mud. You begin to feel the first stirrings of hope. Yet one morning, a cart arrives at dawn, pulled by soldiers and marked with Lord Farron's crest. Grain and wine. Payment for protection. The world outside is still encroaching, still dangerous. The lesson remains: survival requires vigilance, adaptability, and often, cunning. When spring arrives, you leave the monastery. The road back to your village is muddy and filled with debris. The village lies silent and scarred, but the well still flows, and the church bell stands crooked but intact. You draw water and feel its cold bite, a reminder that life persists even in ruin. The hollow of Agnes's absence is still felt. Yet the symbol she left behind the circle, crossed by 3 lines, remains: a map, a sign, a promise of continuity. You trace it with your fingers, absorbing its quiet reassurance. Survival is never solitary. It is shared knowledge, hidden caches, whispered guidance, and small acts of courage repeated daily. As you begin the slow work of rebuilding, you realize the truth. Survival is not about waiting for danger to pass. It is about preparing, adapting, and acting, quietly and wisely. It is about the invisible network of trust that allows a village to endure. The frost, the soldiers, the hunger, they are challenges. Yes, but each obstacle has taught lessons that no winter, no army, can erase. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly resilient by nature or forced into cunning by circumstance. You know the answer lies somewhere in the shadows and hollows, in the hidden grain, in the whispered directions, and in the courage of those who survived by knowing exactly when to fight and when to hide. You close your eyes that night, letting the quiet settle over you. Outside, the wind rustles through the trees and a lone owl hoots in the distance. The village sleeps, fragile yet stubborn. Tomorrow will bring work, vigilance, and continued survival. But tonight, you rest, knowing that the lessons of frost, fear, and hidden paths have given you something stronger than fear knowledge. You pull your cloak tight, feel the earth beneath you, and whisper to the night, "We endure." The thaw comes slowly, unevenly, across the ruined fields. Mud clings to your boots and seeps into the folds of your cloak as you trudge along familiar paths that have grown strange with abandonment. The village is quieter than it once was, yet there's a pulse beneath the ruin, subtle but undeniable. You can feel it in the crook of the church's leaning walls, in the half-collapsed barns, and in the cautious movements of those who survive the winter and the soldiers alike. Life is creeping back, fragile as green shoots through frost-hardened earth. You pause at the square. Most of the market stalls are gone, roofs collapsed, their timbers twisted like broken bones. Yet someone has placed a crude table in the center, lined with dried roots, a few loaves of bread, and a jug of thin ale. The simple act is a statement. Survival continues. You approach, trading a strip of fur you scavenged on the road for one loaf, savoring it slowly. It's bitter, dense, but it tastes of something more profound than nourishment. It tastes like persistence. From the corner of your eye, you see movement. Hugo emerges from the shadows, hair disheveled, cloak streaked with mud. His eyes hold the same weary intelligence you've come to rely on. "I can't believe we made it," he says softly. "I never thought we would." You nod, running a hand along the rough wood of a half-standing fence. "Neither did I," you admit. But here we are. The secret code of survival. You've learned the invisible measures, the silent warnings. The buried grain and whispered instructions has carried you through frost, starvation, and soldiers' boots. You realize it isn't just about hiding or escaping. It's about understanding how people and nature interact. How trust can be wielded like armor, and how patience often saves more lives than courage alone. By mid-morning, the village begins to stir with cautious activity. Children, thin but determined, run between the huts, chasing one another in games older than memory. A woman hums while hanging laundry, the scent of damp cloth and soap mixing with the earthy aroma of thawing soil. In the blacksmith's forge, sparks fly as metal meets hammer, a rhythmic reminder that the village is alive again, even if scarred. You help wherever you can, carrying firewood, patching holes in walls, mending tools. Every action feels like a quiet declaration. We are here, and we will continue. News travels swiftly, carried by the few who venture farther than necessary. A traveler arrives from the next village over, speaking of distant towns untouched by the winter's fury and the Lord's greed. Some bring warnings of new plagues, some of distant skirmishes. The world beyond your village feels immense, daunting, and at times almost unreal. Yet even from this distance, it reminds you that survival is a negotiation, not just with immediate danger, but with a shifting, unpredictable world. Evening comes, the air crisp and soft. The villagers gather around a small fire outside the largest remaining hut. Conversation is subdued, each word chosen with care. Plans are whispered for the preservation of grain, the protection of children, and the redistribution of work. Everyone participates, silently agreeing to the unspoken rule that survival thrives on cooperation. The circle has grown, its invisible lines binding the villagers together, creating a network stronger than any single pair of hands. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly possessed agency in their communities, or if their oppressions were mere instinctual responses to oppression. You know differently. Survival is deliberate, strategic, and often creative. Each buried sack, each secret exchange, each gesture of trust and caution is a proof of agency, testament to the resilience of those who refuse to be erased. Days blur into weeks. Barley shoots rise stubbornly through the softening soil. You kneel beside them, pressing seeds between your fingers, feeling life pulse beneath the thin earth. The memory of frost, of hungry eyes and steel, lingers, but it fades under the promise of growth. You recall the monastery's teachings, the monks' words echo faintly in your mind. Faith is the only coin that does not lose value. You understand now that faith alone would not have saved you. Your hands, your vigilance, and your shared knowledge with the villagers did. One morning, a rider appears on the road, dusty and cloaked, no crest to mark allegiance. He dismounts near the well and leaves a small bundle bread herbs, and a scrap of parchment marked with a circle and 3 lines you remember from Agnes's door. The gesture is simple yet profound, a link in a chain that stretches beyond your village. Whoever left it understands the same code you live by. Survival is shared, maintained through trust and discretion. You present the bundle to Elsa that night, her eyes widening as she recognizes the symbol. She's alive. She whispers, voice trembling with hope. Perhaps, you say carefully. Or perhaps someone is carrying her message. The distinction doesn't matter. What matters is that the network endures, that the secret knowledge of survival is spreading beyond your immediate sight. You begin to notice patterns emerge in your village. Children are tended by those who can spare time. Adults rotate responsibilities and knowledge of herbs. Planting and emergency food caches is quietly distributed. You realize that the village has transformed into a living system, each resident contributing in ways both visible and hidden. Survival is no longer an individual pursuit. It has become a collective effort, a shared rhythm that keeps hunger, fear, and the Lord's greed at bay. One evening, after a long day of planting and repairing, a child runs up carrying a bundle of fresh herbs, sage, rosemary, and blessed thistle. They offer it shyly, and you feel a deep satisfaction. It's a reminder that the lessons of survival are being passed on, quietly, subtly, and effectively. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and soil. You step to the edge of the village, gazing over fields and the forest beyond. Somewhere out there, hidden paths lead to other communities, other survivors, other secret exchanges. The symbol carved in bark or stone, the circle with 3 lines, becomes more than a map. It's a promise, a connection to those who lived before and those who will follow. Night falls. The village gathers again around a fire. Conversation is still cautious, but warmer now, punctuated by laughter that feels both fragile and defiant. Songs arise, old tunes and new ones intertwined, sung softly but with intention. Each melody, each whispered story is part of the code, a reinforcement of survival through culture, memory, and communal resilience. You lie back on straw, gazing at stars that glimmer coldly but reassuringly overhead. You reflect on the months past the frost, the soldiers, the near-empty barns, the lessons learned. Survival is not just about evading danger. It's about cultivating knowledge, trust, and courage. It's about the invisible threads that connect people, guiding behavior, and creating networks of endurance. Days continue to pass, blending into weeks and months. The barley grows, roots sinking deeper into the softened soil. Roofs are repaired, fences rebuilt. Children learn to play with caution and freedom, and the villagers develop a rhythm that balances vigilance with hope. You understand that the code of survival is now embedded in every action, every planting, every whispered instruction, every hidden loaf of bread. Even when danger threatens to return, the village is no longer defenseless. A quiet strength has emerged, forged in frost and fear, tempered by necessity, and reinforced through collective wisdom. You see in every face determination, knowledge, and the subtle spark of rebellion against the world's cruelty. The circle of survival continues to expand, quietly, invisibly, beyond what anyone can fully measure. You walk through the village at dusk, listening to children laugh and adults work, and you realize that resilience has become second nature. The code of survival, the buried grain, the secret messages, the careful exchange of information is no longer just a plan. It's a living system, a network that ensures the village will endure whatever comes next. You close your eyes as night settles. The wind rustles through the trees, carrying whispers of distant forests, hidden paths, and other villages still surviving. You feel connected, not just to the present, but to a lineage of survival stretching across time. Every small act of courage, every hidden morsel, every cautious decision feeds into this web. You are part of it, and it is part of you. As you drift into sleep, the lessons of frost, fear, and secrecy settle into your mind. Tomorrow will bring work, vigilance, and new challenges. But tonight, under the stars and the soft glow of embers, you rest knowing the secret code of survival is alive, thriving, and carried forward in the quiet determination of the village you helped sustain. The air smells different, no warmer, though not quite safe. The sun has fully risen, spilling gold across the village that has slowly begun to rebuild itself from ruin. You walk through the square, stepping carefully over frozen mud and splintered wood. There's a rhythm to the place again, a quiet pulse beneath the visible decay. Children chase each other around the posts of half-erected fences, and somewhere a woman laughs while hanging laundry. The sound feels fragile, almost sacred. You pause at the old well. Water flows steadily, clear and cold. You remember the early days of frost, when survival was a whispered negotiation between hunger and faith. Every step was careful, every word measured, every gesture loaded with potential consequences. And yet, here you are, alive, still standing, still able to draw water without the shadow of soldiers looming overhead. Hugo joins you, carrying a bucket of freshly drawn water. "I can't believe we made it," he says softly. His eyes, once dulled by fear and fatigue, now hold a spark. "I never thought we would." You shrug, trying to appear nonchalant, though your heart is beating faster than it should. "Neither did I," you admit. But we did. Somehow, the secret code of survival, you realize, wasn't just about hiding food, or avoiding soldiers, or following whispers through the forest. It was also about memory, remembering who could be trusted, which paths were safe, which seeds grew well, and which stories were true enough to guide action. Even in desperation, even when frost and hunger and fear conspired against you, the small network of knowledge, loyalty, and courage made life possible. By midday, the village has taken on a semblance of routine. The blacksmith hammers steadily in his forge, sparks flying like fireflies. Elsa kneads dough beside a makeshift oven, the smell of fresh bread warming the air. Hugo tends to a plow, checking wheels and mending iron bindings. You help where you can, carrying firewood, patching holes, and offering guidance to those too weak or too wary to move quickly. Word spreads quickly. Another survivor has arrived from a distant village. They bring news that the Lord's men have moved east, distracted by new campaigns and rumors of disease. Relief ripples through the village, but it's tempered by wariness. You've learned that survival is never permanent, and complacency is dangerous. That night, you gather with others by a fire outside the largest hut, still standing. The wind carries the scent of earth, smoke, and the faint sweetness of winter's last apples. No one speaks loudly. Conversation is a soft murmur, careful not to draw attention. Yet in those quiet exchanges, strategies are shared, seeds are discussed, and instructions for preserving hidden stores are passed along. Every gesture is a part of the code, the silent agreements and shared glances that form the lifeline of survival. The stars begin to emerge, one by one. You trace constellations with your eyes, remembering the nights spent in the forest. Hiding beneath the yew trees, listening for wolves, waiting for soldiers, and learning how to move unseen. Those nights were long, fearful, and lonely, yet they taught lessons no book could patience. Observation and the understanding that life is not owed but earned through vigilance. Later, as the fire dies down, Hugo sits beside you. "Do you think we'll ever go back to the way things were?" he asks. His voice is soft, tinged with a faint echo of longing. You shake your head. "No, things will never be the same." But maybe that's okay. Maybe survival isn't about returning. It's about learning to live in the world as it is, with its dangers and its small mercies. He nods slowly, staring into the dying embers. "I suppose that's all we can do." The next morning, you rise before dawn. The frost is gone, and the first signs of spring touch the fields. Green shoots push stubbornly through the soil, breaking free from the winter's grasp. The sight fills you with a quiet awe, a reminder that even after the harshest winters, life finds a way. The villagers work alongside you, planting, repairing, and preparing for the months ahead. Every seed sown is a small act of defiance, a declaration that you intend to survive, to endure, to flourish. You pause to watch Elsa at the oven, kneading dough with care. Her hands are strong, yet gentle, and you realize that every gesture in this village, every act of labor or kindness has become part of the code. Each person contributes in their own ways, sometimes in secret, sometimes in secret. Survival is no longer just individual. It's collective. Historians still argue whether medieval villages functioned more as units of labor or as networks of trust. You know from experience that the answer lies somewhere in between. Each person matters. Each decision matters. Each hidden loaf or buried sack or whispered warning is part of the continuum of life. Days blend into weeks. You begin to notice small patterns. Who tends which plots? Who can be relied upon to watch children while others work? Who has knowledge of herbs and which roots soothe pain or stave off illness? The lessons from Agnes, the monastery, and the forest all converge. The code of survival is now tangible, written in the routines, the gestures, and the vigilance of the villagers. One evening, as you sit by the fire outside the largest hut, a child comes running up, carrying a bundle of fresh herbs. For you, they say, offering it with a shy smile. You recognize the plant sage, rosemary, and a touch of blessed thistle. You smile back, remembering the first lessons of survival, of the balance between medicine, faith, and intuition. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of wood smoke and distant rain. You stand, brushing ash from your cloak, and look around the village. The roofs are patched, the fields tilled, and the firelight dances across faces that have endured hunger, fear, and frost. They are alive. They are resilient. And they have learned, in ways both subtle and profound, the secret code of survival. You walk to the edge of the village, looking out over the fields and forest beyond. Somewhere, hidden paths lead to distant villages, two other survivors, two networks of aid that stretch beyond sight. The symbol of the circle with 3 lines appears again, scratched into the bark of a tree. You touch it, a connection to those who came before, and a promise to those who will follow. Night falls, and you return to the square. The fire burns low, embers glowing like scattered stars. Villagers gather quietly, sharing bread, herbs, and stories. Laughter begins to rise again, soft at first, then stronger. Songs emerge, tunes remembered, and new ones created from the heart of endurance. You lie back on the straw, gazing up at the sky. Stars glimmer, distant and cold, yet reassuring. The world is vast, unpredictable, and dangerous, but you are here, breathing, thinking, feeling. You realize that survival is not about fear or avoidance, it's about knowledge, trust, and the courage to act even when the odds are stacked against you. The night deepens. Crickets begin their chorus, wind rustles through the trees, and the faint smell of bread and herbs lingers. You close your eyes, letting the sounds wash over you, letting the rhythm of the village lull your thoughts. The code of survival is no longer just lessons or symbols, it's life itself, lived fully, quietly, and bravely. Tomorrow will bring more work, more vigilance, more hidden acts of mercy. But for now, you rest. You have learned to listen to the soil, the wind, the fire, and the people around you. You have survived winter soldiers and fear itself. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you know that this resilience, this quiet courage, will carry you through whatever comes next.